Hello. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, good. I can hear myself. Hi. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. I'm Lauren McCardle. I'm the executive director of the Berman Museum here at Ursinus College, and I'm really thrilled to welcome you all here tonight for our Artists in Conversation panel, presented in conjunction with the exhibition that you're seated within right now, New Neighbors. So this exhibition is really near and dear to many of our hearts. It kind of explores and celebrates relationships and artistic exchanges, particularly in this case between Ursinus College studio art faculty and artists of their choosing from the greater Philadelphia region. So and this is the second of two panel conversations where we've got two of those artistic pairings with us tonight that we're going to hear from as they talk a little bit about their individual practices and how they think about ideas of creative exchange and collaboration, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to quickly introduce the people that I have up here with me, and then I'm going to hand the mic, so to speak, over to our first presenter. So with us tonight, we have Cari Freno. She lives and works in Philadelphia and is Associate Professor of Art and Art History and Sculpture and Drawing here at Ursinus. She's exhibited her work both nationally and internationally and has spent time as an artist in residence at the Pajama Factory in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and as a Landscape Experience Fellow at Mildred's Lane in Beach Lake, Pennsylvania. And then Cari, when we asked her to think about an artist or creative collaborator that she'd like to show her work alongside or in conversation with in this exhibition, suggested Nadia Hironaka and Matt Suib, Philadelphia-based artists who have been collaborators together since 2008. They have a bio here that lists many awards and fellowships, which are really quite impressive, and their work has been exhibited nationally and abroad at many, many venues. They've been artists in residence at locations such as Headland Center for the Arts, the Banff Center, and many others. Matt is co-founder of Greenhouse Media, and Nadia serves as a professor of film and video and studio arts at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Um, then we have right next to me Sarah Pater, a painter based in Philadelphia who teaches printmaking here at Ursinus. Her work blurs the aesthetics of boredom and attention with office, leisure, domestic design, daily experiences, and painting conventions. She has shown in solo and group exhibitions at places including the Lighthouse Works, Helen J. Gallery, Pete Projects, and many others. And she received her MFA in painting from the Rhode Island School of Design and a BFA in painting and printmaking from Boston University. So Sarah, I believe, knows Tony from their time at RISD. Tony's work explores the relationship between humans and nature, combining a childhood nostalgia for imagination and fantasy with the social and environmental realities of the history of American landscapes. He draws inspiration for his paintings and sculptures from ruins, disaster, science fiction, myths, and magical realism, aiming to capture the evolving sublime dynamic between humankind and nature. And so each of the artists that you have in front of you today have work on view here in the gallery. And we're going to start by having them talk a little bit about their individual practices or collaborations. And then we'll just open things up to a conversation. I'd love for everyone up here to feel free to talk to each other, ask each other questions that might come up as we're hearing these brief presentations. And then we'll open things up to you all and invite your questions as well. So I am going to kick things off by handing things over to Cari, and your mic should be easy enough to turn on, I think.
Testing.
You're good.
Okay, great.
You can either let me know if you'd like me to advance, or you can advance yourself. How do you want to proceed?
What do you want to do?
I can give you this clicker, or I can click for you.
Either way.
All right.
I can click. Thank you. Okay, is that fine? Okay. I have a couple images up here that sort of trace the history of my practice that kind of led me to the work that is in the gallery here. So especially I think for the benefit of students that are here, I want to kind of like show you that trajectory. This is some older work that I was looking at. This is a dual monitor video installation. But I realized when I was looking back at this that dough has kind of been a prevalent material in my work for a while, as well as consumption and the act of um, like the interaction within a relationship. Here you can see the snake and the toad, and then there's two arms stretching this dough across a doorway. So these works I think are from 2015, 2016, this video installation. And then this work came after that. It's when I had started making molds. This is actually a mold of my father's face that I then made this sculpture out of pasta dough. So I started thinking about intergenerational exchange and the sort of things that are passed down generationally from, you know, the people that sort of create the situations that allow us to develop. And I was thinking about how that is consumed. And so I was making sculptures of my parents out of food, basically. And then I had rolled all of this like rabbit hair into the pasta to make my dad's beard, but then all these moths got into it. And so that's actually like all of this like weird webbing and moth feces that's like on the face. Anyways. And then this is when I first sort of baked my parents' faces in the molds. It seemed like that would be a good idea. I think also my practice was kind of changing because I had become a parent myself at a certain point when this work was being made. And I was home a lot more and thinking about like the realm of the domestic sort of more as my material, as opposed to some of the earlier video work. I was like a little more free and childless and in the world and could like go do things in a different way. And so I was trying with this to sort of find a way to make work while I was like in the home. And then that led to some video I made of feeding my parents' faces to fish, which was actually really disturbing. So I'm just showing a still. It was more disturbing than I expected. This work is from an Italian artist that I'm going to pronounce wrong, Roberto Cugi, but I saw this work at the Venice Biennale in 2017, and it had a really strong effect on me. It was this huge installation, but he had made these figures of like the Christ figures out of gelatin, and then let them sit in this like arsenal room for months and months and months, and they would sort of like wither and dry out and become these really strange figures. And then he posted them all up on the wall back there. And that was like over the course of months and months. Um, and then this work, this was uh, a show from 2022 where I did a more sort of formal exploration of my parents' faces in bread, embedded different ceramic parts into it, and presented these titled artifacts and was sort of thinking about them, you know, kind of tried to present them in the way that you might see an artifact that is important to history presented in a museum. I started playing with that a little bit more. And just thinking about like an artifact of the past. And this was that part of that installation. And then these are a couple just inspirations and influences into this work. This is a still from Peter Greenaway's film, The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, in which there is consuming of a body that happens. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. These are, and on the left, there are some paintings, drawings by Camille Henrot, a French artist who I'm a huge fan of. One of her video works, Gross Fatigue, was also just a really inspirational experience for me as an artist developing. And then on the right, there's this effigy vessel that also I thought sort of spoke to this idea of consumption that I was like really attracted to and thinking about relationships and what is sort of given and taken between people. And I think, yeah, I think that's all I have. Now your names are up.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia Hironaka, and this is
Matthew Suib.
It's Matthew Sue. We've been collaborating, really, I guess our first project that we collaborated on debuted in 2008. So it's been a long time. We've got lots of different works out there. But I think for this presentation, are just going to talk about like a few. And, Cari, I think because you were talking so much about thinking about like the bread and the faces and consumption, but also mortality and this notion, I'm thinking because of the piece we have in the show, Vanitas, thinking about death is, something that we were thinking of when we first made this piece back in 2018. And for those of you who are seeing it here, who have probably, some people have commented, oh, it seems it's really large, a really large video projection. But actually, we tend to, and you can turn the volume off if anyone wants to. We tend to do a lot of work that is projections in public spaces and pretty large. And so this was actually a commission project for a hotel in Miami during Art Basel. So you were seeing it on the whole side of the hotel. But we were thinking very much of that time period in 2018 when the current president was also during that period was also president, and we were thinking of ways to kind of comment on a political situation that we were very unhappy with, and for us was speaking a little bit about issues about mortality and like this end of a certain state of political affairs as well. And so while the images that you may see, at first you might, oh, they're flowers or there's fruits, they're actually in the Vanitas style. The flowers were all put in the oven, they're wilted. The fruit is, we like set outside and it was moldy. And then the glasses, we're breaking the mirror, we're breaking the glass. So it was very much about kind of things coming to an end, what's going to happen. The future is very unknown. And we were feeling very sort of off in terms of that current time period. So it's really interesting to be showing it again now in this current time period as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about Field Companion?
Yeah. Actually, so Vanitas 2018 was made in 2018, as Nadia said. The other works we're going to show you actually are from 2019 up until pretty recently. This piece is called Field Companion. I actually want to click ahead a little bit and go back. Okay, maybe not. Too many. Okay, so this piece is sort of illustrating a couple of things we've been interested in for quite a while, which is large-scale projections that create immersive environments. And this began with a small-scale terrarium that we created and designed as a film set. It's mirrored on the inside. And we used a series of kind of specialty cameras and camera support equipment, robotically controlled jibs to make this film, presenting this tiny terrarium as an expansive forest. And what we were sort of moving away from more overt political commentary, trying to focus on questions and ideas that get at more values that are positive rather than sort of against something, sort of laying out what we are interested in projecting out into the world rather than sort of echoing the negativity of the discourse around politics, but we see them as quite related.
So like how do things work? So thinking about systems and thinking about nature, this is the time, just was during COVID when we made this piece, and we were going on a lot of hikes and a lot of walks to get, a sense of fulfillment for us. And we had a young daughter well, I mean, she's an older daughter. We had a young daughter who we were going out and really exploring nature. And we are also avid mushroom foragers, and we love doing that, and we love hiking. And so we were like, well, wait, how can we combine this love of being outside and the hikes and exploring this and then make a piece with it? So the terrarium was pretty, it's about 3 feet by maybe 2 feet. But we wanted to create this vast world that we could then show in a very large scale environment. So you can see pictures of the making process of the terrarium. And then there's also some, I think, installation shots of when and so again, there's a two-way mirror. So you're getting this hall of mirrors effect. We're filming both outside the terrarium and also inside the terrarium. But thinking about community, thinking about how out in nature things work. Sure, there's animals that eat other animals, and yet they're still able to live, near each other. So how can these systems kind of abide?
So the narrative of the film it basically revolves around a conversation between the inhabitants of this kind of miniature forest, and they are sort of talking about the relationships that sustain the ecology of that forest. So there's themes of mutualism and collaboration that were important to us in thinking about how to kind of work together to build a community, to better an environment, and all through a kind of maybe a more neutral discourse, but that talks about these values of, again, mutualism and the way that sort of that we're all kind of entangled with each other, so that those relationships, which are seemingly incidental, are actually really important in communities and environments. This is an installation view where we projected, we had a sort of narrative film on a screen that was suspended in the center of the space, and then projected large scale images from the terrarium all around the space, sort of flipping the relationship between like the tiny things inside the terrarium and viewers in the space who essentially become part of the terrarium by being inside of this projected environment. So a few installation stills, and we'll get to one more piece that we'll speak briefly about. This was a related window piece from an exhibition at Locust Projects in Miami of the same work. And the other piece we'll show is called Moon Viewing Platform from 2019. In which this was a large scale public artwork in which we were able to create a viewing garden in a space between 17th and 18th Street near Community College on Callow Hill in the middle of Philadelphia. It's where SEPTA had a rail line that used to run into the middle of the city, but it's been disused for some time. And we were able to create a viewing garden in this space that also became a film set, which we made a film in that was then projected onto an adjacent building. So here's some stills from that, and the film follows the phases of the moon. So there's 8 characters. Is that going to play? Yeah. I don't know if it's going to autoplay. Let's see. One more click. 8 characters, all of whom are gardeners. They are actually the same character, but played by different individuals, from small children, including our own, and some other kids who live in our neighborhood, or lived in the neighborhood at the time, all the way up to I think a 75-year-old avant-garde jazz drummer who is on some legendary free jazz recordings. Christina Martinez, who's an activist and chef in South Philly. She owns South Philly and runs South Philly Barbacoa. Is another Sarah McEnany, who's in the show, is also one of the gardeners. So there are people who contribute to the kind of cultural life of a community, both in the past, currently, and in the future. So that was important for us to kind of relate different kinds of people as the same characters. And I'll let you talk a little bit more about.
I mean, just to think too, like those last two pieces are very much about a celebration of community. Community maybe in a different way than maybe traditionally we think of community and talking about arts and the arts world, but thinking very much about all of the people around us, like in our spaces, like nearby and in like who live on the street or the businesses we frequent or the institutions that we go to, and how they really help to shape and sort of, foster our lives and our sense of being, for us, we also get a lot of sense of inspiration from the larger community that we're part of. So it was about in times of strife and in times that are really difficult, really taking an opportunity to think about and celebrate that larger community that makes us all, really come together. So both on a small scale with the terrarium and on a large scale in a public space, different ways of examining and thinking about how these again, I'm going to go back to systems. I've been talking a lot about systems earlier today, but how they kind of work together and ultimately form, a sense of community.
And the last thing I'll say, I think we've probably gone well over our 5 minutes here, is just what you're looking at here is a series of is documentation of the project and performances that happened over the course of the month that it was on view. Part of the viewing garden was a performance area, and over the course of 3 weekends, we invited musicians from Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia to perform in that space, to gather people together around a garden, around an artwork. Oh, and yeah, we should also mention our collaborator. We had another collaborator on this project, Eugene Liu, who is a musician and composer, and he's got his fingers in all sorts of creative projects around the city. And yeah, this has become, since we started collaborating in 2008, a really important part of our practice is to periodically invite other people in to collaborate on projects with us. We just find that the work goes places that that we usually can't predict, and we love that, and it almost always is better off for that possibility of creating something really unique and distinct. All right, we'll pass this on.
You guys can advance that. That just not.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt and Nadia and Cari. I think in a little while I'm going to invite you to talk a little bit more about Cari, what made you interested in working with Matt and Nadia, and what your all's response was initially. But first, we're going to hear from Sarah Pater. And then after that, we'll pass things off to you, Tony, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Okay, is this on? I don't think I've ever used a microphone in my life.
Welcome.
I'm Sarah Pater. I'm actually teaching painting this semester, but I have taught printmaking and drawing here. So I'm just going to talk about the works that are in this show because they're all from the last year and a half. So actually, maybe going to go over this. So broadly, my approach to making paintings is that I'm trying to make a depiction of this like new visual experience in the world for everyone, that is that we exist between physical reality and also virtual or digital space, and that we're like flipping back and forth between those kinds of spaces. So like walking down the street and you're holding your phone and you're like looking at stuff, flat images or text and things on your phone, and then also existing in nature or in this, wherever you are, like in the physical world. And so in my paintings, I'm trying to like to figure out a way to depict that that essence of that visual experience. So that's my like starting point. And so the painting, I think of it, I think it becomes sort of like this collage-like experience of moving between like flatness and dimensionality and touch and digital design. And so the paintings are sort of like these composite images of multiple elements kind of collapsed into one flat image. And I guess paradoxically, or as a counterpoint to that, I'm really interested in the idea of stillness and long looking, or like how to extend the period of like a visual experience, because digital space or like photographic images are like we can consume them really quickly, like we understand them and see them really quickly. And paintings are really good at kind of slowing down a visual experience, or they can be much more like you can reread a painting, whereas a photograph, you maybe see it and understand it more quickly. So I'm interested in this, like in contrasting that, the visual or the physical, digital tension with this, yeah, attention to slowness and slow looking. And so anyway, some of these paintings are from a show that I made late last year. And the show was, so these paintings, these two, and the one on the right here, that were part of a show that was about where I was interested specifically in thinking about how to visualize the actual physical components of the internet. So the undersea cables that comprise the physical internet infrastructure. And so each of the paintings in that show had images of the internet cables. So this one on the right, it's in the image of the cable is in the frame, and on the left, it's more, that's like the whole image. And they're kind of hard to see because there's not that many images of the internet cables available, and I obviously can't go there and look at them. And they also like look like nothing because they're kind of just like the scale of a garden hose on the ocean floor, crisscrossing like the whole world. So that was interesting too, like to find that out. I never had even thought of it, like what the internet looks like as a physical infrastructure. And then in this one on the right, it's also in the frame, there's a depiction of the internet cable. And then these other three paintings, or four paintings, are works I made earlier this year. So they don't have images of the internet cables, but they're other, it's a good depiction of like things I'm working on more recently. And these two images with eyes are images of, or are in reference to this film called Satan Tango by the filmmaker Bela Tarr. That's a 7-hour or 8-hour film that is really, really, I mean, it's about like authoritarianism, I think, but it's also about slow looking. And there's this part where an owl is watching people sleep, and there's like a narrator that's describing the people's dreams. And I really like that image. And so that's, I'm thinking about authoritarianism this year. So that's where that comes from. And yeah, I don't know. That's it. Well,
the clicker. All right, so yeah, I'm Tony. The way I sort of just threw some, so these two drawings here, I tend to work in bunches, I call it. Like a large portion of my practice is just making drawings. For the most part, they're either 9x12, 11x14, or really big like that. And there's not a whole lot of logic into how I come up with imagery to draw. It's mostly just stuff I'm interested in. And then it ends up becoming like sort of an extended world building project where I'm basically just sort of drawing a world that I'm interested in. Everything from science fiction to movies to video games, to other artists, to random scraps of advertisements I find on the street. I really sort of like have no clear way that I gather imagery, but the main project is sort of accumulating it. And once I have accumulated, maybe a couple months or maybe a couple years, I've accumulated a large amount of drawings, and I sort of start to think about them as bunches or like eras. It could have been, I think about them as like I just finished, like the third novel of Game of Thrones, or a chapter in a book. So these two drawings, I sort of just gathered some images that I could find of sort of the era or the bunch that these two drawings came from. Unfortunately, they're not great because during that time I wasn't really showing, so I didn't do a great job of documenting the work itself. But so these are just 4 drawings that lived with these drawings around the same amount of time. And the big drawings tend to sort of be mostly about accumulation and sort of indecision, where there's a lot of reworking. None of them are ever finished without once having been completely wiped down, painted over, and then redrawn. So they sort of exist in like an almost constant state of like unfixed. And also the nature of them being mostly pastel and gouache and charcoal and such means that they get dusty, they get smudged. I can go back in and repair them at any time. They're kind of impermanent. And then let's see. Okay, yeah, so this is another large one here. And a lot of them, like especially the big ones, sort of just end up being like kind of dumb, random ideas. Like at the time that I made this, I was reading a lot of Arthurian legend, and this is basically Guinevere driving a Prius, slaying Lancelot and Arthur. Absolutely not even trying to be particularly like ham-fisted about the content. It was just sort of like how it came out, and sort of echoed what I was interested in, what I was reading. And then, as far as the small drawings go, this is an accumulation of them from the same period of time when I made those 2 big drawings. And the small drawings really work. Some of them are really quick and provisional. I might make like 3 or 4 in a night. Some of them take a lot longer. Probably in the entire body of work of the last 10 years, there's several thousand drawings about this size. I would say, maybe 25% of them are actually quote unquote finished. And a lot of them kind of like keep cycling through the studio where I like work on them a little bit, throw them away. One of the principles I kind of think about with these guys is that I never take like no for an answer. No matter how, much or how stupid the drawing is or how much I destroy it, I'm always gonna come back to it and try and save it, which definitely leads to some weird, strange solutions to things. But there's lots of different content. You can see there's you probably can't quite see, but there's there's images from movies in some of these. That little yellow stick figure guy there, that's a painting I found that a little kid made on a canvas of Trump. So then I just made a painting of that painting from gouache and colored pencil, but then it sits next to like up to the upper left there, there's a scene from an imagined scene from Lord of the Rings. So they sort of all like live together in the same kind of like, stuff I find, stuff that relates to the world now, and then stuff that has absolutely no relation to anything relevant. And there's another accumulation of them in the studio, sort of how they get built. These are the ones that are like not quote unquote finished or that haven't come to rest yet. And same with these 2 as well. Some of them are simpler. And then sometimes they live together too, as well. So for example, this one on the left is this, mythological creature that I came up with and slowly, constructed onto the paper. And then there's that little stick figure, this Trump on the far right. In the middle is sort of like a weird riff on a Matisse painting. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sarah and Tony. Here, I can take that clicker from you. This last slide I was going to get to later, but I'll just leave this QR code up here. We do have a catalog that's fresh off the presses that's available at our front desk where you can read a little bit more about these artists' work in context. It's a wonderful publication that I encourage you to check out. But first, I would like to take about 10 or 15 minutes before we open things up for Q&A I think we'll start with Cari, Matt, and Nadia. Let's just talk a little bit about how this joining together came about. What your relationship, if any, was like before. You can explore that a little bit with us and just share with the group how you see your ideas or practices. I'll use the word like synergizing or working along common themes or in conversation with each other as folks who I don't believe knew each other before this show, which is really interesting, which I'd like to talk more about. And then we can talk about how you, Sarah, and Tony have had a relationship for many years and how that's sort of informed your interest in working together for the exhibition. Does that sound okay? Cool.
Okay. So for a while, I have been really aware of the two of you. I lived in South Philly for, I guess, 15 years before we moved out of the city, and had been aware and of your work, seeing your work around, and was really inspired by the scale of your projects, and also I think the way you spoke about it in terms of the moon viewing platform was really lovely. But I also, like, at a certain point in my life, worked in like museum education, so thought a lot about events and the public, and like bringing people into sort of like art making and art experiences, and the sort of like installation and experiential nature of what you make and what you created was just like a real sort of goal that I had for my own practice as I was kind of coming out of grad school. And I think I just like looked up to that a lot. And so when this opportunity came to invite someone to show locally, I thought like, oh, how amazing would it be to connect in this way. So that's kind of why I invited you. So grateful that you contributed.
Thank you. I'll just say quickly, yeah. I mean, we really appreciated the invitation, and I think it gets to something more broadly and generally that has really inspired us about being artists in Philadelphia, which is and this exhibition captures that spirit quite well, which is this kind of collaborative spirit or an inviting spirit and a spirit of exchange. We've worked in as artists in Philadelphia for 25 plus years, have been involved with artist cooperatives and collectives, and that's been a sort of foundational part of our experience as artists in Philadelphia. And so it's very much part of our practice to connect and interact with other artists. I will say, as we've gotten older and we have, a teenage daughter now, we've gone through the early years of parenting, that we're not quite as in the thick of things as I feel like we used to be, but we still appreciate sort of connecting with people who we haven't met who are making great art, and also, I think that's clear throughout this exhibition that I think there's a lot of connections to be made between artists in the city. Some, incidentally, some of the artists included in the show, selected by other faculty here, are artists we've crossed paths with many times over the years. And in terms of connecting with Cari, yeah, it was really the invitation was the first introduction we had, and so we really appreciate the outreach and getting to meet you and see your work and show alongside you, especially in this particularly excellent piece, which makes me laugh every time I see a student eating a teacher's face. It's really good. I'll let Nadia say a word.
Well, and talking about like sort of synergy, I just happened to wear this shirt today. And then I'm like, of course I wore this shirt today because it goes so well with Cari's piece. So, just thinking about this idea, I think as Matt was talking about expanding upon like collaboration for those of you who are artists out there or, working either as an individual artist practice or collaborative. I mean, I can't say enough about collaboration really just sort of blossoming. I think our own like take on being artists. We were individual, we had separate practices for many years, and then we're kind of challenged by another gallery out in LA to do something collaborative, and we did it, and it was hard, and it worked. We'd already been together as a couple for like, gosh, I think a decade at that point, and could not for the life of us get over our own egos because part of being an artist, you guys, right? It's a lot about the ego. And if you're doing it by yourself, you don't really have to justify too many things that you do. You can kind of just do whatever you want. For us, we had to have a lot of communication and conversation about the choices we would make when we started collaborating. And it was hard at first. We would argue not even about the idea. We would argue about how to go about to begin having the idea. Eventually we got over that, and all I have to say is like when it clicked, it really clicked. And some of the works that we showed were when we started, especially inviting other collaborators in and working, especially with a lot of musicians, but also designers, landscape artists, you name it. It's really kind of wonderful what you can do when you do start to think about your practice expanding in a more collaborative nature, and it just can kind of grow and blossom. So I would encourage at some point, whether it's a collaboration of just like inviting other artists to have an exchange with your work or actually making other artworks together, it can be very freeing as well. If you get stuck in a spot, it kind of allows for you to be like, well, okay, this is maybe not just my solo practice, then this is something else. So you can try and test some new ideas and concepts out.
Thank you all. And to your point, Nadia, to all of your point, I think the thing that I love the most about this exhibition and the essays in the book and this conversation is just thinking about, we hear and we use the word collaboration so often, but it can mean so many different things. And it can look so many different ways, and it can involve different types of relationships, new or existing. And so that to that point, maybe we can talk a little bit about your relationship, Sarah and Tony, and sort of how it led to Sarah, you wanting to show your paintings with Tony's very, very different materially in terms of scale, his drawings, and what your relationship has been like.
Yeah, so I know Tony from graduate school. So we've known each other since 2013 or something. Honestly, I didn't actually realize you were asking us to pick someone who was like in the same vein as our work. It was more like, yeah, so I feel like I I wasn't thinking in that way, but rather like someone whose work I just really respect and think deserves some to be seen. And Tony came to mind because you had recently had that, or it wasn't that recent, but you'd had that show in Philly, and it was in this like small, really small gallery space in a basement. And you have these giant drawings jammed in there, and then also you can see, you probably saw in the images like that big grid of, he makes so much work, and like that's been the case since I've always known you. You'd like you go into my studio and I have like 5 paintings. You go to Tony's and he's got like every surface covered in drawings and just like stacks and like mountains of paper, and then giant stuff on the walls and just covering like every inch of the studio. And so I was really just thinking about like this museum space, and like it's so big and you'd have a lot of room to like walk around the work and like get further away from it than I mean, that show was amazing. And so, but it was small. I mean, just by the nature of which was cool too, but it was just different. So I was thinking about how great it would be to see these big drawings on like a big properly big wall. But I also think there is like a connection between, especially I was thinking as you were talking about your work about accumulation,
And I kind of didn't mention, or I skipped over like the like talking about the subject matter in my, like the objects represented in my paintings, but I kind of think of it in a similar way. Like I don't think I really give that much, I don't put that much pressure on like the literal objects being represented, like meaning any specific thing. It's kind of like things I come across in life that accumulate into like something like an image that seems interesting or compelling, and then I'll like put it into a painting with other things that I've come across. So they're coming from like different sources and just like things that I'm reading and things that I'm seeing. And so I think that does relate to what you were describing in a way. And then I also, the other thing I think about with our work is that they both have like the simultaneity of multiple images and like the reward of longer looking. So like the longer you look at Tony's drawings, like you'll start to see more stuff emerge. And that's something I try to do in my work as well. Like, but the longer you look at it, you'll notice more things, or like in some of my paintings, I have relief elements that are maybe not like seen when you're across the room, and then you go over to the painting and some other second image comes, emerges. So there is, I mean, plenty of relationship between
Yeah.
work too, even though they like appear, yeah, I work much more small scale and like really different type of mark making, although we're both like very, very particular and perfectionist in our ways.
Yeah. I mean, we're both super particular. But I mean, it's funny because when you selected me for this show, I also was kind of like, what do we actually have in common? You know what I mean? We like known each other. We always like argue about stuff. We like, we like a lot of the same stuff. We like a lot of different stuff, but it was never like, oh, we should definitely be in a show together. But then I think the first thing that I noticed was that we both kind of like, our work definitely exists in like non-spaces, like in spaces that can only exist in painting, and in drawing. And even like you have a new painting that I saw in your studio today where there's like, only that light and that atmosphere can happen in your painting, and there's something like you could read it as, it could be mystical, it could be fantastical, it could be any number of things, but like the fact that it exists in this crazy space that can only be made by you in oil paint, like that's something that's really important to me too. Sort of like using painting or drawing as like a stage to kind of like assemble whatever you want. And I think another thing about your paintings that like things reveal themselves over time. I think that because you spend so much time on your paintings that like you might notice everything that the painting has in it, quickly, but then a lemon, or a target, or an undersea cable like ends up gathering meaning because of its like import in such a minimal image, and you spent so much time on it that it's like irrefutably important, and therefore you have to like let it sort of like grow in meaning or whatever, and then draw new connections from it. You can't kind of like deny it. And that's like really different also from how I work, because I'll often just like, I mean, a lot of drawings will have like a weird cartoon bunny farting in the corner, or some like creature chugging a beer, like that means like absolutely nothing. It's just like me being restless and trying to make something. And it's like literally the complete opposite as if you put a character in a painting. So.
Well, thank you again, all of you. Oh, Nadia, yeah.
I did realize I wanted just to talk just briefly and thinking about like, even though Cari, Matt, and I didn't know each other like so well before, thinking about how time really was quite relevant in the connection between our work and knowing, of course, with some of the early works of you're doing video art and, us really, I mean, whatever. I love the moving image. I can't, obviously I am taken with the moving image because you're experiencing it in the present moment. So I think that's really powerful. But thinking about how you're creating these, both the sculptural pieces, but also the performance, are so much about thinking of time, so standing in front, whether watching a student as they're eating the face of their professor, reading a book that their professor has assigned to them. So we're watching something, but we're thinking always about before and also the past and the future while we're in the present moment and looking at the bread faces too. And even though I believe that hopefully nothing will happen, in in the container where there's no mold or anything that will get in there. But if there was, to see this evidence of time also starting to deteriorate or break down or shape or warp what we're seeing in a sort of present state. So just thinking about how, the notion of time and how we experience an artwork was, I think, something that also connected us quite well.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because like these are definitely non-archival pieces. Like they will not last. They will either turn to dust or they will, get moldy and rot. And like the pasta dough one with like the moth, like bugs will get into them. So yeah, time is like a material or a method that I think about in all of my work. And I think yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
It's a common thread across all of your work. I think all of you have mentioned it in one way or another, which is interesting. I don't know that that's a thread that we've pulled on before um, here at the museum before this conversation. We have a few minutes left, and I'm interested in hearing if anyone in the audience has any questions for our artists, or if our artists have any questions for each other. Yeah.
How do you get over the quote unquote ego of having to work together? And two, how do you get collaboration once you got past that hump? How do you help you grow as an artist?
This it took, I was explaining earlier, we were each other's competition for a period of time, so that was really rough. It took this other gallery to propose to us, like, hey, you guys could either do 2 solo shows, but we would love it if you would join forces and do a collaboration. And I think because the pressure was no longer, it wasn't on us, like we didn't make that call. We had tried before to do some collaborative work, it didn't work. But when it was an outside entity that kind of, positioned us, would you be interested in doing this? It was a challenge. And I think when it was a challenge, we were like, yes, we're up for it. And I guess that's whatever, our relationship had mellowed enough that we had enough trust also in what we did. The first project, it's funny because it's this sort of a post-apocalyptic scene, and everyone's like, well, how do you, talking about collaboration, right? Natures of collaboration vary greatly. You did backgrounds and I did foregrounds. I mean, that sounds funny, but like in terms of the compositions, it was all a lot of special effects, a lot of, after effects, putting creatures together or putting buildings together. And then we would, pass it off to one another and shift. But for us, in terms of how we work collaboratively, it's not like we're always now doing one pass, next pass, next pass. So we both do the production, the filming, we both do editing, we both do sound design, it's all of it. In terms of how did that then, really progress? Do you want to speak to that?
I'll add really quickly that I think I use a different term than Nadia in terms of what you set aside when you collaborate. Certainly there's no shortage of ego amongst artists, but I think what's really valued by most artists is autonomy. Maybe they're related, but they're not exactly the same, and it's a rare field where as a professional you can you can have the autonomy to kind of produce the wildest things that have no function necessarily, and that's it's a huge appeal, I think, of being an artist, is to sort of follow your vision towards the creation of something that's then shared. And I'll add one of the really valuable things that came out of our sort of getting over the hump and being able to collaborate was understanding when to set aside that autonomy, because it's great to have autonomy, but not everything that you do or I do is going to be brilliant, uh, it's hard to get a sense of that if you are not working or if you don't have someone to give you feedback and someone that you really trust. And we had ironically built up this trust over years of working in parallel, sharing a studio, making work that was different, both formally and thematically, but also had a lot of common threads. And so we had developed a kind of trust where at a certain point, I understood that if she was saying this idea that I was proposing for this collaborative work was dumb, instead of just immediately getting offended, and we did use that terminology at moments, stupid, there were some, yeah, some language there, but I won't share here. But being able to say, you know what, like if you were saying that to me, maybe it is, and also this is not the only thing we can do. So if, so learning to sort of be flexible and to not be, emotionally attached to every single thing as like this brilliant thing that I came up with was actually a huge learning opportunity that came about through collaboration. And I think we're at the point now where we dispense with ideas just like that, like, nah, I don't like that. Okay, like what's next? What's something we can agree on that we do think is worth pursuing, and invariably we wind up with something that sort of sets aside like our less successful tendencies and sort of funnels our better tendencies, into a more focused kind of project. So.
Any other questions? All right, go for it.
For, really inspiring. All talk about your work and yours. And I'm wondering, as artists, what do you do when you have to get over feeling as to hit a plateau in your growth, and how have you tried, or how have you like gotten over that feeling of when you hit a plateau and you can't progress in your respective fields?
Who wants to start that one?
I mean, I'm trying to figure it out now, so I have no idea, honestly. Yeah. I mean, actually, I genuinely am trying to figure out what's next, and I'm like, yeah, totally lost. So I'll let you know when I figure it out.
I mean, I think you kind of either like wait or you work, and or it's like some combination of the two. And I guess that's kind of obvious, but I feel like the nature of my practice, and I'm assuming maybe like with the bigger projects that you guys do, it's like a different kind of practice, I would assume, as opposed to going to the studio every day and putting, hours into a canvas. There's like a lot of thinking and writing and listening and talking and taking notes, and and then when, something occurs, you kind of like act on it or find a way to act on it, or you're given a situation where you can create a proposal and do a thing. But sometimes you have to, I think, get comfortable with that. Like maybe that's part of what's between waiting or working. You have to kind of get comfortable with not knowing, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll just say that as for me, as a painter, it is like go to the studio kind of thing. And I guess plateau creatively is different maybe than like professional plateau, but when I'm feeling like a plateau creatively, I think that's the time to not go to the studio, and like you have to go do stuff, live life, and like go see movies that you don't wouldn't normally go see, and go to the museum, and go like live in the world, and go for runs, and like go to the park, and like do nothing. And something hopefully eventually like sparks your imagination, or like you go for a walk and don't like bring your phone and walk around, and like stuff starts to percolate. But I think it takes time, and you have to just be okay with not knowing, and it sucks. And then professionally, I think going to the studio and doing the work, it can be like a good time, because you're like, if you don't have a deadline coming up, then you can like really just take your time on stuff and figure it out, and like work on stuff for a lot longer maybe than you normally would, or put things aside and come back to them, and that can be super fruitful also. And then eventually, someone notices, hopefully.
And I get asked a lot from my students. And so I always explain, think of like you're going for a hike, okay? And you're going to hike and you're going to reach some kind of plateau, right? That hike is not straight. So that hike is around boulders, you're doubling back, you feel like, you're walking to the side, you're taking 5 steps back. So it's a real meandering path, but it's all for growth and progress. So even like failures, like I love like fail. You should fail. Like failure is okay. It's still part of the process. It's still going to help you move forward. If you don't take risk, if you don't, test things out, then you'll never know. And so, all steps are part of it. And even if you have some pieces that are less successful than others, that's okay. No one's going to have like each piece is like the best piece ever each time. It just doesn't work that way.
Are you plateauing? You're so young. I think what everyone said actually is there's bits of good advice and all of that. And I think for me, it's been what Cari said about working or waiting, and waiting actually has been good. There's been moments where I've just decided I'm not interested in making art at the moment. Um, and at some point I am. Like it just is, it's just part of my constitution that the ideas will bubble up at some point, and I'll wait for them to do that so that I feel like I'm not, forcing myself to do something that then becomes feels like a chore and not like what I got into it, to do at the beginning, why I like making art. And working professionally in the arts is not all about that stuff that you're doing now in school, experimenting and really getting to do whatever wild thing you might want to do. There's, there are obligations and there's expectations. All those things can weigh heavily. And so sometimes I think it actually is good to just like step away from them for a minute. It actually can be productive to wait, to take a moment. Yeah.
One last thing.
Yeah. So one piece of advice I give students too is that so I think that especially when you're like a younger artist, or like earlier on in your career, you just like want to be make. And I think that that's like it would, it's you also need to like consume things as well. So I often tell like if you're gonna take a break, be really conscientious about taking a break. If you're gonna go binge watch Netflix, that's all well and good, do it, enjoy it, but watch something that might actually like influence you, something that's gonna like actually like provide some kind of sustenance intellectually, even if it's like in the subtlest of ways. So I always think about like if you're stuck in the studio, you're stuck making things, there's so much other stuff that's going to influence your practice. Don't forget that you could take weeks and still be productive and just like input stuff into this system so that when it's time to like put it out there, you've got fuel.
Thank you all for your thoughtful responses to those questions. Nadia, Matt, Cari, Tony, Sarah. It's been really wonderful to be in conversation with you all tonight. Thank you all for being here with us. It's wonderful to see so many students here in the room. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and feel free to stick around, ask questions, continue talking for a few minutes before we wrap up. And then finally, I'll just say this might be news to some of you as well, but we are planning to do a little launch party for this book with Ulysses in Philadelphia, which is a bookstore in Philadelphia. That'll be on December 11th at 6 p.m., I think. So if any of you all have that evening free and are able to get to Philly, we'd love to celebrate with you and all of you as well. So thank you again, everyone, for being here with us tonight. Thank you.